The rusted sign still hung from a single chain, squeaking softly in the evening breeze. Wonderland Park, it read. Though there was nothing wonderful about the decaying structures that loomed behind the chain-link fence, I pressed my camera against the diamond-shaped gaps, trying to capture the eerie silhouette of the Ferris wheel against the setting sun. The perfect shot for my urban exploration channel. "You sure about this, Marcus?" Aiden's voice betrayed his nervousness as he glanced over his shoulder. The empty parking lot stretched behind us, cracked asphalt reclaimed by persistent weeds. "It'll be worth it," I assured him, already scaling the fence. "Think of the views. This place has been abandoned for nearly 20 years, and hardly anyone's documented it properly." That wasn't entirely true. People had tried, but something always seemed to happen to their footage. Technical glitches, corrupted files. In one notable case, an entire YouTube channel mysteriously vanished overnight. Urban explorer folklore, I'd always assumed. Stories to keep the amateurs away from the prime locations. Aiden reluctantly followed me over the fence, landing with a soft thud beside me. Shannon was already checking her audio equipment, her red hair catching the last rays of sunlight. "We've got maybe an hour before it gets completely dark," she said. "Let's make it count." We'd been planning this expedition for months. Wonderland Park had closed abruptly in the summer of 2005, following what the newspapers had vaguely described as a series of unfortunate incidents. The official story involved financial mismanagement and safety violations. But online forums buzzed with alternative theories. Missing children, bizarre accidents, ride operators who'd quit without notice, refusing to explain why. The perfect subject for my channel's most ambitious video yet. The main promenade stretched before us, nature reclaiming what humans had abandoned. Tree roots buckled the concrete walkway. Vines strangled lampposts. The empty storefronts stared back at us like hollow eye sockets. "This place must have been something back in the day," Shannon murmured, pointing her microphone toward a fountain where a concrete dolphin eternally leaped from stagnant, leaf-filled water. "Opened in 1978, I recited from my research notes. Started as a small local attraction, but expanded rapidly throughout the 80s and 90s. They were planning to add a water park when everything fell apart." I moved ahead, filming the peeling murals that covered the bathroom buildings. Cartoon animals with wide, manic eyes and stretched smiles. The paint had deteriorated in a way that made them look diseased, melting. One particular mouse character seemed to be crying black tears. "Hey guys!" Aiden called from a nearby concession stand. He emerged holding a stuffed animal, a faded purple monkey with one button eye missing. "Souvenir?" "Put that down," Shannon said sharply. "We're not taking anything, remember? Documentation only." "Relax, I was joking." Aiden tossed the monkey back inside, but not before I caught an odd expression cross his face. Disgust, maybe, or something else. We moved deeper into the park. The roller coaster, the Thunderbolt, rose above us, its wooden structure groaning in the wind. Sections had collapsed entirely, creating a twisted sculpture of decay against the darkening sky. "Let's check out the midway," I suggested, consulting the old park map I'd found online. It should be past that building. The building in question had once been some sort of indoor attraction. A spooky house, judging by the faded sign. Professor Grimshaw's Mansion of Mystery. Typical haunted house stuff, I narrated for the camera. Probably strobe lights, people in costumes jumping out at you. "Looks like the real deal now," Aiden muttered, eyeing the sagging roof and boarded windows. We skirted around it, all of us, unconsciously quickening our pace. The midway was a treasure trove for our cameras. Abandoned game booths lined both sides, their colorful facades now weathered to ghostly pastels. Stuffed animals still hung from some of the stalls, reduced to moldy, unrecognizable lumps. A basketball game still had balls in the return chute, deflated and green with algae. "Check this out," Shannon called, shining her flashlight on a wall of photographs. It appeared to be a display of winners from over the years, faded Polaroids of smiling families holding oversized teddy bears or comically large checks. I leaned in closer, filming. Most of the faces had faded beyond recognition, but something about the images felt unsettling. Maybe it was just the knowledge that these captured moments of joy had occurred in a place now defined by abandonment and decay. "Hey, Marcus." Aiden's voice had a strange quality to it. "You might want to see this." He stood before a large structure draped in shadows. The Carousel. Unlike everything else in the park, it seemed almost preserved. The ornate canopy remained intact, and many of the carved animals still stood proudly on their brass poles. In the dying light, I could make out horses with flared nostrils, a dragon with outstretched wings, a grinning sea serpent. "This is incredible," I whispered, circling the ride with my camera. "It's like time hasn't touched it." "That's what's weird," Aiden said. "Everything else is falling apart. Why is this in such good condition?" Shannon approached one of the horses, her hand hovering over its painted mane. Maybe it was the park's centerpiece, something they maintained better than the rest? For 20 years after closing? Aiden shook his head. "Doesn't make sense." I was only half listening, too focused on getting the perfect shot. The carousel sat on a slight elevation, giving me a view of the surrounding park. The light was perfect now, the magic hour photographers dream about, casting everything in a golden blue glow. "Let's set up here for our intro," I decided. "We can film the opening segment with the carousel as our backdrop." Shannon hesitated. "I don't know. Something feels off about this spot." "That's exactly what we want. Off equals atmosphere." I handed her my secondary camera. Can you get some B-roll while I set up the tripod? She took it reluctantly. I understood her unease. There was something undeniably haunting about the carousel. The animals' painted eyes seemed to follow our movements. The craftsmanship was remarkable. Each creature carved with unsettling detail. The dragon's scales looked almost alive in the fading light. The horse's expressions weren't the usual placid carousel smiles, but contained something fiercer, wilder. One horse in particular caught my attention, a black stallion with eyes painted blood red, its lips pulled back to reveal sharp teeth. That can't be original, I muttered, approaching it. No kid would want to ride that thing. As I raised my hand to touch its mane, a gust of wind blew through the carousel, creating a sound like distant calliope music. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees. "Did you guys hear that?" Shannon asked, her voice tight. Before anyone could answer, a sharp, metallic groan echoed from somewhere deep within the structure. We froze, exchanging glances. "Probably just settling," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. These old rides make noises as the temperature changes. But a creeping sensation had settled at the base of my spine. A primitive warning signal that something wasn't right. We finished setting up quickly and filmed our introduction. I tried to focus on my usual patter about the history of the park, but I kept stumbling over my words. Something about the steadily darkening sky and the looming presence of the carousel behind me made it hard to concentrate. "That's good enough," I said finally. "We can re-record parts later if needed. Let's check out the rest while we still have some light." We packed up our equipment and moved toward the children's section of the park. The rides here were smaller. A miniature train on a circular track, teacups, a small Ferris wheel designed for children. Unlike the carousel, these attractions showed their age. The train cars had been vandalized, the teacups cracked and filled with rainwater. According to the stories online, I narrated for the camera. This is where most of the incidents supposedly happened. "What incidents?" Shannon asked. Though I could tell from her expression, she was already regretting the question. "Well, there were rumors about children going missing. 3 of them, if the forum posts are accurate. Supposedly, they wandered off from their parents and were never found. The park denied any connection, but it contributed to their financial problems," Aiden finished. "Bad publicity." "Exactly. There were other things too. A ride operator claimed he saw one of the mechanical clowns move on its own. A maintenance worker reportedly fell to his death from the thunderbolt, though there were no witnesses." Shannon swept her flashlight across the children's area. "Falling from a roller coaster seems pretty straightforward. Not exactly supernatural. The weird part was that he had no reason to be up there. It was his day off. And when they found his body..." I hesitated, remembering the disturbing details I'd read. "Well, his expression was supposedly one of absolute terror, and there were marks around his neck, like something had grabbed him. The wind picked up again, whistling through the abandoned rides. Shadows lengthened across the ground. "It's getting dark fast," Aiden observed. "Should we head back soon?" "Let's check out one more area," I urged. "The Hall of Mirrors should be right around that corner. It'll make for great footage." Shannon checked her watch. 20 minutes, max. Then we need to leave before it gets completely dark. We navigated around piles of debris toward a cylindrical building with a faded star pattern painted on its exterior. The entrance to the Hall of Mirrors was partially blocked by a fallen sign, but we managed to squeeze through. Inside, it was significantly darker. Our flashlights created eerie reflections in the few mirrors that remained intact. Most had been shattered, their fragments crunching beneath our feet. "Careful," I warned, pointing my camera at the floor. "Don't cut yourselves." The layout was confusing. A deliberate maze designed to disorient visitors, even when the attraction was functional. Now, with many panels missing and others cracked, it was doubly difficult to navigate. "This place gives me the creeps," Aiden admitted, his voice echoing strangely in the confined space. I was about to agree when something caught my eye. A flicker of movement in one of the intact mirrors. I swung my flashlight toward it, but saw only my own reflection. "Did you see that?" I asked. "See what?" Shannon had moved ahead, her voice distant. "Nothing, just jumpy, I guess." We continued deeper into the maze. The temperature seemed to drop with each turn. I found myself checking my watch repeatedly, uncomfortably aware of the fading light outside. Just when I was about to suggest turning back, we emerged into a circular chamber at the center of the attraction. Unlike the rest of the maze, this room was perfectly preserved. Mirrors lined the walls from floor to ceiling, creating infinite reflections of ourselves. In the center stood a peculiar mechanical device, a brass contraption shaped like an oversized music box, with a crank on one side. "What's this supposed to be?" Aiden asked, approaching it cautiously. "Some kind of special effect for the attraction, maybe?" I focused my camera on it. "Try turning the crank." "I don't think we should touch anything," Shannon objected, but Aiden was already reaching for the handle. The crank moved easily, as if the mechanism had been recently oiled. A familiar tinkling sound emerged, the same calliope music we'd heard earlier near the carousel. The notes hung in the air, distorted by the acoustics of the mirrored room. As the music played, something strange happened to our reflections. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, our flashlights creating unusual shadows. But as I watched, horrified, the reflections began to change. They moved independently, their expressions shifting into grotesque smiles. "Guys?" My voice caught in my throat. Shannon saw it too. "What the hell?" In the mirrors, our reflections were no longer mimicking our movements. They stood perfectly still, staring back at us with wide, unblinking eyes. Behind them, other figures began to appear, shadowy forms with indistinct features. Children, I realized, with mounting dread. Small, thin silhouettes with hands pressed against the glass. We need to leave, now. Aiden backed away from the music box, which continued to play its haunting melody without his assistance. We turned to retrace our steps, but the maze seemed to have shifted. Passages that should have led outward now curved back toward the central chamber. The mirrors multiplied our panic, showing dozens of versions of ourselves running in different directions. "This way," Shannon called, finding what looked like an exit. We followed her through a narrow corridor, the music growing fainter behind us. After several wrong turns, we finally glimpsed natural light ahead. A side exit we hadn't noticed before. We burst through it, gasping for air. Night had nearly fallen. The park looked completely different in the deepening twilight. More threatening, more alive somehow. Wind rustled through the abandoned attractions, creating a symphony of creaks and groans. "Let's get out of here," Aiden said, his usual skepticism replaced by genuine fear. "We have enough footage." I nodded, my heart still racing. "Yeah, you're right. Let's pack up and—" My words died as I realized we had emerged on the opposite side of the park from where we'd entered. The fence line was visible, but between us and freedom stood the carousel. "We'll go around it," Shannon decided, already veering to the left. But as we tried to skirt the ride, the wind suddenly intensified. The canopy of the carousel began to rotate slowly, though no power had run through the park for decades. The calliope music returned, louder this time, no longer distant, but surrounding us. "Run!" I shouted, abandoning any pretense of professional composure. We sprinted toward the fence, but it seemed to recede with each step, like a nightmare where you can never reach your destination. The world tilted strangely, and I realized with horror that the ground beneath us had begun to move, rotating like the carousel itself, dragging us back toward the center of the park. Shannon stumbled, her equipment bag slipping from her shoulder. Aiden reached for her, but a sudden surge pulled them in different directions. I lost sight of them as the world spun faster, blurring the boundaries between the park attractions. When everything finally stopped, I found myself alone, standing before the carousel. It rotated slowly now, the animals rising and falling on their brass poles with fluid, natural movements. The music had softened to a gentle melody that tugged at the edges of my consciousness, almost hypnotic. "Shannon! Aiden!" I called, my voice swallowed by the vastness of the abandoned park. Movement caught my eye, a figure climbing onto the carousel. In the dim light, I could just make out Aiden's familiar jacket. Relief flooded through me. "Aiden, we need to go." He didn't respond, mounting one of the horses instead. The black stallion with the blood-red eyes. His movements were stiff, unnatural. I approached the edge of the rotating platform. "Aiden, what are you doing? Where's Shannon?" As he turned toward me, I recoiled. His face had changed. His features remained recognizable, but his eyes had gone completely black, and his mouth was fixed in a rigid smile that exposed too many teeth. "She's here, Marcus," he said, his voice layered with other voices beneath it. High, childish tones. "We're all here, waiting for you." Behind him, other figures now occupied the carousel animals. Shannon sat atop the dragon, her head tilted at an impossible angle. And there were others, small shapes that could only be children, their features obscured by shadow. "This isn't real," I whispered, backing away. "This can't be happening." "Why did you come here, Marcus?" The thing that wasn't quite Aiden anymore slid off the horse, moving toward the edge of the carousel. "Did you think you could just take your pictures and leave? Everyone pays for admission. Everyone takes a ride." The carousel began to spin faster, the music distorted, the notes stretching and twisting until they sounded like distant screams. The carved animals seemed to breathe now, their wooden nostrils flaring, painted eyes tracking my movements. I turned to run, but invisible hands grabbed at my clothes, my hair, my skin, pulling me toward the carousel. I fought against the force, screaming for help that wouldn't come. As I was dragged onto the platform, the black stallion turned its head toward me, its wooden neck moving with impossible fluidity. Its mouth opened wider than any horse's should, revealing row upon row of needle-like teeth. "Your turn to ride." The voices chorused from Aiden's mouth. I was lifted off my feet by unseen forces, placed firmly on the stallion's back. The wood felt warm, pulsing beneath me like living flesh. The brass pole impaling the creature began to twist, wrapping around my legs, binding me to the horse. "Please," I begged, though I didn't know who I was addressing. "Please let us go." The carousel spun faster, the centrifugal force crushing me against the stallion's back. Through tear-blurred eyes, I saw the world beyond the carousel change. The decrepit park transformed, buildings restoring themselves, lights flickering to life. Ghostly figures appeared on the pathways, visitors from decades past, enjoying a park that no longer existed. And among them walked a tall figure in an antiquated suit, a gaunt man with a skeletal face partially hidden beneath a top hat. He moved through the spectral crowd, occasionally stopping to place a hand on a child's shoulder. Those he touched would turn to look at him with blank expressions before following him toward the carousel. "Professor Grimshaw welcomes you," the voices said, now coming from all around me. "The show never ends. The carousel never stops." The brass pole continued to wind around my body, the metal softening, becoming organic. It pierced my clothing, my skin, fusing with my spine. Pain, unlike anything I'd ever experienced, tore through me as I began to transform, my flesh hardening to wood, my blood turning to paint. Through the agony, one desperate thought surfaced. My camera. It was still recording, clutched in my rigidly transforming hand. If I could somehow preserve the footage, warn others. With the last of my humanity, I pressed the memory card eject button and flicked the tiny rectangle away from the carousel. It sailed through the air, landing somewhere in the shadow of the concession stand. As consciousness faded, the world kept spinning. The last thing I remember seeing was my reflection in a decorative mirror on the carousel's center column. My face had begun to change, features rearranging into a frozen smile. My eyes were already wooden, flat discs painted with meticulous detail. And I understood, in that final moment of clarity, why the carousel had remained so perfectly preserved while the rest of the park decayed. It had never lacked for fresh materials. Three weeks later, Detective Laura Herrera stared at the fence surrounding Wonderland Park, her expression grim. 3 missing persons, all last seen heading this way with camera equipment. No signs of forced entry. No abandoned vehicles. Nothing to suggest they'd ever arrived. Except for the memory card her partner had found near the entrance. A tiny rectangle of plastic containing 62 minutes of footage that made no sense. 3 young people exploring the park, getting progressively more anxious as darkness fell. And then chaos. Spinning images. Screaming. Impossible angles. The final seconds showed a carousel spinning in the dark. Animals moving that shouldn't be able to move. And a fleeting glimpse of faces that matched their missing persons' photos, their features contorted in terror. Most of her colleagues had dismissed the video as an elaborate hoax, a publicity stunt for their YouTube channel. Kids these days would do anything for views. But something about it haunted her. Something about the genuine fear in their voices. The carousel that, according to park records, had been dismantled and sold for parts years ago. Her radio crackled. "Herrera, you need to wrap it up. Captain wants us back at the station." "Copy that," she responded, eyes still fixed on the rusted gates. As she turned to leave, the wind shifted, carrying with it the faintest notes of calliope music. Detective Herrera hesitated, head cocked, listening. Just the wind in the metal structures, she told herself. Nothing more. But she quickened her pace all the same, leaving the shadowed entrance of Wonderland Park behind without looking back. Behind her, unseen, a faded sign swung gently in the breeze, as if greeting visitors who would never leave.